France created West African CFA Franc in 1945 as a currency for its African colonies.
Hello, my name is Pudja Safana Putri with number student 123241092, and this video is a self-commentary podcast for Western Cultural Civilization final project, which we will talk about CFA Franc. Before we moving to my self-commentary about the video and also my personal opinion about this issue, we will talk about the background story first about this issue. So, what is CFA Franc? The long version you guys can read by yourself here because it is really hard to memorize. But in short, CFA Franc is a colonial era currency introduced by the France in 1945. Right after World War II ended. So at the time, France, like other European powers, trying to hold onto its colonies. The currency originally replaced the French franc in these African colonies. Even after so-called decolonization in 1960s, the CFA franc still survived. In fact, it's still used until today in 14 African countries, which is it's split into two, West African CFA Franc and also Central African CFA Franc.
West African countries like Senegal and Niger and 6 Central African nations like Chad and Gabon use the CFA franc. The Union of the Comoros has a similar arrangement, even though they use the Comorian franc.
So, how does this system work? The CFA franc always worth the same amount as the euro because the value is fixed. The French government makes sure that this fixed value stay the same. But here's the problem. The 14 countries that using the CFA franc are required to deposit 15% of their foreign currency reserved into a special account managed by the French government. France also has the power to block or reject about how the money is managed. So in short, these African countries don't control their own money. It's like when you guys giving your wallet to your friends but you need to ask their permission before using the money. So it is like kind of unfair and cruel, right? At a glance, the system looks stable. Low inflation, predictable exchange rates. But how about deep under the surface? Well, it's been called monetary imperialism. Here's the reason. France benefits by gaining cheap access to Africans' raw materials. For example, uranium from Niger, oil from Gabon, cocoa from Ivory Coast, and many more. French corporations also dominate the key industry in the region, including their energy, infrastructure, and also port corporation. Meanwhile, the African countries, they can easily invest their own development because the reserves are heavily managed by the French. That's really cruel. And now, you guys might wondering, can these countries just leave the CFA system? Well, they have tried, guys. In 1960, Guinea under Secretary rejected the CFA franc by planning its own currency. But of course, France retaliated, cutting off aid, sabotaging their economy, and even allegedly flooding Guinea with counterfeit bills to induce the chaos. And there is more. In 1963, Togo's president Sylvanus Olympio was assassinated just months after announcing plans for monetary independence. Isn't this too suspicious to be called a coincidence? Even though CFA franc countries have been independent for such a long time, somehow their economies are still some of the weakest in Africa. Like this for the example. In 2023, Ivory Coast had low inflation, only 5.8%, while Ghana had very high inflation, about 29%. At first, that seems like a good news for Ivory Coast. But here's the catch. Ivory Coast has almost twice as many people living in poverty compared to Ghana. Why? Because CFA Franc countries cannot change the value of their currency to help sell more exports or support their economics during tough times. They are stuck in a money system that was made to benefit others and not themselves. And now, this section is where I'm going to talk about my own take of this issue. Well, I find that this issue both frustrating and also kind of cruel because we often talk about independence is where countries can freely sing their national anthem and also raise their flag. But the real independence is, guys, when countries can control their own nations, can control their own economics without being influenced by other countries. What shocks me the most is how this system is so normalized. It's like the people affected by it have been trying to think that this is just how things are. That's the power of systems that operate in silence. They make injustice look like order. If 200 million people in 14 countries don't fully control their own money, what does independence really mean? It's also a reminder that history isn't just stay in the past. Colonial structures can live on, not in chains or armies, but in contracts, institutions, and even in banks. And honestly, it's not just France's responsibility here. The African elites who get personal benefits because maintain the system is also the part of the problem too. The future has to be built by people who are ready to break from this comfort zone. So, the CFA franc isn't just some currency. It's a relic of colonialism dressed in modern financial clothing. As the world changes and African countries rise, one thing is clear. No country can be truly independent if it doesn't control its own money. Finally, we have reached the end of this commentary podcast. Thank you so much for paying attention till the end, and bye bye!